Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the engine room of a state's economy, its finances. How does a government actually use its budget to kickstart growth? Well, we're going to break down the strategy behind the numbers, and we're using Bihar's recent fiscal story as our case study.
So, let's kick things off with the big number. 2.82 lakh crore rupees. That's the total planned spending for Bihar in the 2024-25 fiscal year. Now, to give you some perspective, that's a huge jump from just 1.66 lakh crore back in 2020-21. We're talking about a massive increase in just a handful of years.
But, a bigger budget doesn't automatically mean better results, right? The real question isn't just how much money is being spent, but where is it actually going? Is there a real plan behind the surge in spending? Let's dig in and see.
And that brings us right to the heart of Bihar's financial story. It looks like there's been a very deliberate, very strategic shift in where the money is going, moving away from just covering today's bills to actually building for tomorrow.
Okay, now this slide tells a really interesting story, just visually. On the left, you've got the budget breakdown from 2020-21. On the right, 2024-25. Do you see that orange slice? Notice how it's gotten bigger? Well, that represents a very specific kind of spending that is absolutely key for long-term growth.
So to really get what this means, think about your own household budget. Revenue spending is for your day-to-day costs, things like salaries, subsidies, interest payments. It's kind of like your groceries and your utility bills. Capital spending, on the other hand, is for building things that last. New roads, hospitals, schools, energy projects. It's the down payment on a house. It's a real investment in the future. And here's where you really see that strategy in action. Bihar has consciously boosted its capital spending from just under 16% of its total budget to over 22%. That is a crystal clear signal that the state is prioritizing creating lasting infrastructure and value to fuel sustainable growth for years to come.
Okay, so a plan to invest in the future is fantastic, but you've got to have the money to back it up, right? So where is all this funding coming from? Let's take a look at how the income side of the books has also been transforming. Because this isn't just about spending money differently. It's also about earning money differently. See, to fuel this kind of investment, Bihar has been working hard to become more financially independent and less reliant on funds from outside. And this illustrates that shift perfectly. Again, look at the two snapshots in time. That big blue slice, that's the state's own tax revenue. You can literally see it swell from 70% of total receipts to a much healthier 84%. So the main takeaway here is that the state is leaning more on its own economic activity to generate cash. Its own revenue has jumped up significantly, and at the same time, its dependence on grants from the central government has been nearly cut in half. That is a classic sign of a state strengthening its own financial foundations. All right, so we've seen how they're spending more on investment, and we've seen how they're earning more on their own. But what's the ultimate goal here? What's the why behind all these numbers? The answer really is in this one figure. In 2024-25, more than two-thirds of the state's entire budget was earmarked for what's called developmental spending. That's money that goes directly into things that fuel economic growth and public welfare.
And this isn't some brand new trend. As you can see from this chart, there's been a steady and pretty significant increase in funding for these growth-focused initiatives. It's jumped from about 1.1 lakh crore to nearly 1.9 lakh crore in just 5 years. That's a serious commitment.
And if you look at the breakdown of that developmental spending, social services, we're talking education and health, consistently get the biggest piece of the pie, at 46%. This just shows a clear choice to invest directly in people's well-being and human development. Of course, anytime we talk about this level of spending and long-term investment, you have to ask about the other side of the coin, debt. How is that being managed?
So this is the state's total outstanding debt projected for March 2025. And yeah, on its own, it looks like a massive number. It's easy to see why big debt figures like this can make people a little nervous.
But, and this is really important, when you're analyzing public finance, context is everything. That absolute number doesn't tell you the whole story. The real key is to measure the debt against the size and strength of the economy that has to support it.
And that brings us to this key metric. Bihar's total debt is 37.7% of its gross state domestic product, or GSDP. This ratio is the standard way, internationally, to measure if debt is sustainable. It gives you a much clearer picture of the state's actual fiscal health.
This quote from the analysis really sums it all up perfectly. It shows that the borrowing isn't a sign of a crisis. It's part of a managed strategy. It's a calculated tool they're using to directly pay for all those developmental and investment goals we've just been talking about.
So when you put all these pieces together, the clear shift to long-term investment, the growing financial self-reliance, and a careful approach to debt, what you see is a very deliberate economic blueprint emerging. And I think the question this case study leaves us with is a big one. Could this be the model for other states to follow?